Hello and welcome to this Omron Tech Talk. During this video we'll see how to data log power consumption readings from an NJ or NX machine controller connected to a KMN2 power monitor. The data log CSV files will be stored on an SD card plugged into the NJ or NX CPU. To access the log data, you could simply remove the SD card from the CPU or, as I will be showing here, access the SD card in situ via a PC and an Ethernet connection via FTP, since all NJ and NX CPUs support FTP Server and Client functions as standard. To demonstrate these FTP features, I'll be using FileZilla. Visit the FileZilla project website for more details and downloads. To set up an NJ or NX controller for FTP Server functions, make the setting in the FTP tab in the Ethernet IP port settings in Sysmac Studio. Enable the FTP server and enter a login name and password, and normally leave the port number setting at 21, the usual TCP port for the FTP protocol. An FTP client, such as FileZilla, can now access files on the SD card. The NJ and NX controllers also feature a suite of FTP client instructions for use in your ladder or structured text programs to upload and download files and folders between an FTP server, such as FileZilla server, and the SD card. And finally, the NJ and NX controllers feature a suite of SD memory card instructions to write data to and read data from files and folders on the SD card. I will use these instructions to log the KMN2 data to CSV files on the SD card, specifically directory create, file open, file seek, file puts, and file close. I won't go into detail about these instructions in this video as I want to focus on the FTP functions. However, I will show a function block that does use these instructions to log the data to CSV files. Looking inside the function block that writes lines to the CSV file, if we take a look at the variables first, and specifically the input variables, we have an execute bit that comes on to execute the code. We pass in the directory name of where we want to write the files, we pass in the file name, we pass in the file header string, and we pass in the log data string that we want to send. The code structure of the function block, if I zoom out of this and just slowly scroll down, here's the main sequence of code, and then at the bottom there I have the function block instances. If we look at those in a little more detail, I have internal variables declared for, as you would in structured text, for each of these instructions. So directory create is that variable there, and there's the instance there for directory create. We have the same for file open, and there's the instance there. So these are the standard SD card instructions. We have an execute flag, for example, for directory create. We pass in the directory name, we have a done flag, busy flag, and so on. Same for file open. We have a file name, the mode you want to open the file in, and then done flag, busy flag, and so on. So I'm handling the executions right at the bottom there. So in the main code above, I'm just manipulating these execute bits. So that one for creating directory, that one for opening a file. So let's scroll back to the top of the code and I'll just walk you through it. So the first thing we check, is the card ready? Looking at these system variables, make sure it's not an error, make sure it's not write protect, and then we wait for the execute flag to go true. When it's true, we then turn on the directory create bit. That will go on. If that is done successfully, then we go to the next state, so state 2. If we get an error, then we check the error code, and we're looking for error code 1409. So if we look in the instruction manual, we can see for directory create, error code 49 means it already exists. Now that's okay for us. We only want to create the directory that's not there already. If it's there, then that's fine. We can go to state 2. Otherwise, it's an error. So we've either created the directory or we've identified the directories there already. The next step is to open the file here. So we turn on the execute flag to open the file. If we successfully open the file, we go to state 5. We're currently in state 2, add 3, that steps us to state 5. If we don't open it, then again we look at the error flag. And if we get error flag, or error code rather, if we get error code 1403, again referring to the instruction reference manual, the file open, we can see 1403 means file does not exist. So that's okay. If the file doesn't exist, then we want to create the file. We do that in this step here, in state number 3. We want to create the file in that directory name with our file name that we passed into the function block. If that's successful, then the next thing we want to do is add on, we've opened an empty file effectively, so we want to put on the file header. So we pick up the file header that we passed into the function block, we add a character return line feed, and then we execute file put. File put writes a line of text to the file. When we've done that, we go to the next state, state 5, and we then do a file seek. File seek execute here. If I scroll to the bottom, let's have a look at the file seek execute. And you can see what we're looking for is the end of the file. So the file's already open, we want to, or is already created, we want to go to the end of that file. So that's the function of the file seek, just to jump to the end of the file. When we've done that, we take the log string we want to write, just append a character return and line feed on the end, and then again file puts execute is true, so it writes that line to the CSV file. The last step, once we've done that, we close the file, and if we successfully closed it, we just clear all the flags, make sure they're all off. They should be already, but just in case, and then we go back to state 0. Oh, and we wait for the execute flag to go low as well, so we go back to step 0 once that's happened. Looking at the FTP server functions first, I have a project here for an NX1P2. If we look in the Ethernet IP port settings, there's the IP address of my controller, and in the FTP tab I've enabled FTP Server with a login name and a password for the FTP client to use. Looking at some programming, here is my bit of code that communicates with the KMN2 over Modbus and reads the data readings from the KMN2 into this variable here, KMN2 readings. And this section of code here, if I undock and maximize so we can see it all, this will take those readings from the variable here and here and here and build a string that will be written to a CSV file on the SD card. So you do have to write some code. The advantage is that you can structure your data however you want. So here you can specify the header for your CSV file. I've got date, time, and you can put whatever text you like in. So you have full flexibility on how you design the structure of your files. So what I'm doing on a first scan flag, I set up the log file directory name. So a directory called energy log will be created on the SD card. That's the name of the CSV file that's going to be written to. If the CSV file doesn't exist, then it will create a header for this CSV file, date, time, active power, and so on. And then this section here does the actual logging. So I have a variable called log interval set to either a second or a minute. If it's set for a second, then we pick up the 1 second clock pulse bit. And if we're set for a minute, we pick up the 1 minute clock pulse bit to create a trigger to perform a data log. So what we do here is we build the log data string here, and we start off by putting the date and time, and then we convert the readings, so active power, power factor, we convert that to a string and concatenate that onto the log data string. So we build that string up. Finally, I have a Boolean variable here, log file new daily, log file new file daily. What this does, if that's true, then it will use the current date and time and prefix that onto the name of the file, the CSV file. So we get a new file every day. And then finally, I have a function block here that is using the SD card instructions to create a directory if it's not there already, create a file or append to a file if it's there already, add a header onto that file if it's just been created, and then we take that string we just built up in the structured text above, and this will append this onto the file. This project also has an HMI, so an NA series 9-inch model. On the main page it gets displayed. I show the KMN2 readings. If I click on this button here, this brings this pop-up where I can set the logging interval to either not at all, every second or every minute, and I tick this box if I want to create a new CSV file every day. And the name of the CSV file being logged to is displayed in this box here. Just for the moment we'll ignore this. These are all to do with the FTP client functions. We'll come back to that later. Okay, if we show this in action, I'll run up a VNC viewer so we can connect to the HMI. Okay, so here's the main page showing voltage, current, power and so on. So I can click on that button. So we can see I'm logging every minute, I'm creating a new file every day, and that's the name of the file, so any energy log folder, and then the year, month, day, energylog.csv. So if I run up a FTP client, so here's FileZilla client, I can connect to the NX1P2. Just type in the IP address, the username, and the password. Click on connect. I'm connected to the NX1P2. I want to go to the memory card. There's my energy log folder, and there we can see our CSV files. So if I pick today's one, I can drag it over. So on my drive D I've got a folder called energy log files, so I could just drag and drop it across. And then if I show that folder, there it is. So I can just open that, which will open Excel. And there are my readings. So there's my headers: active power, power factor, active energy, reactive energy, with my values. So logging every minute. Turning our attention to the FTP functions on the NJ and NX controllers. If I head back to the NX1P2 program, I have a section here, FTP Client. If I open that, I'm using this instruction here, FTP put file, to push files on the SD card to an FTP server. So to set this up, I have the first thing, I have this variable here, FTP Server. So the details for this include the IP address of the server. So this is the IP address of where the FTP server is, in this case on my laptop. I need to pass in a username and a password, the usual port 21 for FTP messages. I've specified here overwrite is true. This means that the NX1P2 can overwrite existing files on the FTP server. I've put a 1-second timeout, and I'm saying that I'm pushing files to the root directory here, to the root directory of the FTP server. So when I execute this function block, I pass in those connection details. I pass in the server, so the FTP server directory that I want the file to go to. This is the local directory name and file name here. So this is the location or the folder where on the SD card where the file is. This is the file name. I pass in the options, The function block will transfer the files and put the done flag on when that's happened. This line of code, if I get an error or on the done flag complete, I pick up the error ID here in case there's an error. This is this variable here. I just pick up that number and convert that to a string to display on the HMI. And then lastly, I pick up the done flag or the error flag to run a 1-second timer to reset the execute flag. This is just so the execute or the error indicator on the HMI just goes on for a second and then goes off again. So what I want to do is I want the NX1P2 to send files to my drive D in a folder called NX1 data. So if I show the HMI again on the VNC viewer, if I send that now, I'll get an error. This is because I haven't set the FTP server up. To set up the FTP server, I use FileZilla. So what I'll do, I will set up a new user. I have some users here already, but I'll add a new one. We'll call this NX1. We'll enter the password. And then this user, I want to link this to a folder. So I'll point this drive D to this NX1 data folder. Then you specify the access. With read only, I would still get an error because I haven't allowed write access. So I'll allow write access. I'll also enable the other options here, delete and append. If I want to overwrite a file, it will delete the old file and transfer the new one, so you need delete there as well. So I'll just enable all these options. Click on OK. So there's my folder there. If I go back to the VNC viewer, say send, you can see here the files now appeared on the FTP server. So I can open it. And there's my data. I will leave Excel open for a moment. If I go back here to the HMI and send again, I'll get a failure. This is because the file is already open. It's opened in Excel and I can't send it because the file's been locked by Excel. But if I close Excel and send again, it'll be successful this time. So this will overwrite the file that's there. So this is one disadvantage of this method, that only one user can access the file at any one time. So the users in this case being either Excel or being the FTP client, which is one of the advantages of going down the database route of data logging, because you can have multiple clients accessing data in database tables at the same time. With this example, I was sending the CSV file on the click of an HMI button. But of course, being under control of the NX1P2 program, you could send the file whenever you wished. So start of batch, end of the day, whenever you like. I hope you found that useful. Thank you for watching.